Hey guys, how's it going? I'm the Duke of Italy, your favorite lo-fi music YouTuber. And today, Dungeon Synth YouTuber, because today we're talking about, of course, part 2 of the Dungeon Synth chart. It's been taking me a bit to finally record this, but fortunately, I'm here now, and I'm kind of excited today because, it's always a good day to talk about Dungeon Synth, and Dungeon Synth is always an exciting topic, even if it's inconsistent in quality. And of course, I got the obscurity on my face because I don't really want to show my face when talking about something as weird as Dungeon Synth, because it's rather shameful, to be honest. But I can already tell it's going to be a nightmare to edit because I'll be recording this stuff and the audio is already unsynced with the video. Although, as I'm watching myself on the screen, it actually looks pretty good. But, it's going to be hard to determine later. But, last time we covered Depressive Silence and, of course, the man, the myth, the legend, Mortiis. Today we're covering a lot more of a varied approach here, and I also might as well throw in some extra Dungeon Synth recommendations from the year of our Lord 2022, just to throw you guys a bone. One I'll mention just straight up right now, the new Hole Dweller record. Hole Dweller, in terms of modern Dungeon Synth, is kind of the king of the scene right now. It's either Hole Dweller or the one guy that does Grandma's Cottage and all that other stuff. Hole Dweller did a great job. A very texturally consistent record. Kind of comfy synth adjacent, but not like overly lush. Just very pastoral, very calming, not super ambient, but I thought it was a pretty fun record either way. Laughing Shadows by the band Putrid Marsh. This is actually probably one of the best Dungeon Synth records I've actually ever heard. I didn't do a full review of it yet, but I'm going to have to re-listen to it for the end of the year because it was actually really excellent, really atmospheric, really good stuff for helping me write. But what was cool about that one was it was actually really dark and kind of murky, kind of like some of the stuff I covered about a year ago on the other Dungeon Synth chart, if you were around for that. We had Deep in the Dungeons of the Dragon Lord by Wraith Knight. Kind of a mix between the Burzum style synthesizers and really loud stuff that Mortiis would do, but at the same time, I managed to actually really like it. It's kind of hard to explain. It has sort of this orchestral, textural approach that normally would be something that's kind of obnoxious, because Mortiis does that all the time, and Mortiis doesn't always succeed, but here it actually felt kind of a mix between good lo-fi and high-fidelity textures, but it never really managed to bother me, which I liked a lot. Depressive Magi by Den Sorte Dodd, I believe, is more of a Berlin school type of album here, but I thought it was an excellent ambient record. This really leans into the ambient style of things, really contemplative, really a bit melancholic at instances. I found this pretty interesting. One of the more better backgrounded albums from this year in terms of Dungeon Synth. The Siege of Carvencia Keep by Unsheathed Glory. Kind of slept on album. It's also really short. It's under like 25 minutes, I think. But I thought it was really fun. It had some really good sort of growling textures, and it had some good tension to it. Like it was actually leading towards something pretty singular in sound, but I thought it was a pretty solid album. In terms of this year, the Dungeon Synth albums I've appreciated, that's probably all I'm going to discuss right now. But, we do have our material here. But first, I'm going to start off with the last one I was going to discuss because it was the one I liked the least. And this is Valsharun with Seven Wonders of the Ancient World. And this one starts off very promising with a lot of eclecticism, a lot of moving parts, and a lot of very interesting textures. And then the Mortiis horn synthesizer comes in and absolutely ruins everything. And I mean everything. It becomes so loud and so overblown that you just get distracted from any instance of atmosphere that's happening here. And it's funny because it's such an easy fix. It literally could have just been replaced with a different melodic texture. But no, we couldn't do that. And all the ambient portions on this record I love, but it's the giant timpani and the obnoxious horns that really ruins everything. And I've mentioned time and time again how Dungeon Synth, the term Dungeon Synth, doesn't really feel applicable when you've got these giant orchestral movements that really have no intelligence behind them or any thought process that actually makes them sound good. Like when you think Dungeon Synth, you don't expect to hear some huge sweeping movement. You expect it to like at least be like, if it's going to be grand, it's going to be atmospheric and not too quick paced. But no, here it's just got all these exploding sounds and horns, and it's like, is this really meant to like capture wonder? It's capturing more annoyance than anything. And it's such a shame because every time I start to feel some atmosphere from this record, it switches into some BS, and I'm not going to stand for it. I think this one's poor. But fortunately, this is the worst one we're covering today. Everything else is at least a little better. but I'm going to withhold some of the better stuff towards the end. So next we're going to go into Forgotten Pathways, Shrouded in Mystery. This album I was looking forward to for a long, long time. I've had it on my list for a long time, but it did end up falling a bit short. This is an album that if you lean into, you will enjoy it. You got to kind of accept it for all the cheesiness that's here, but that is really the only way to enjoy it. I will say the keyboard arrangements are solid. That is probably the best part here. The actual melodic textures are solid, but it's the percussion. Yet again, that is the downfall of this and many other records here. It's got like the imitation drum kit that tries to sound organic, but it really doesn't work. But this album feels very adventure-esque. When you look at this cover in the black and white and just the isolated nature of this ruined castle, you really expect it to be more melancholic, more chill. But no, it's pretty adventure-y, it's pretty vast, and even a bit upbeat at portions. But I will say, this whole thing is cute. It's cute. And if you want something that's cute, you might get that. What a lighting change as I hold my hand out like this. But this is certainly an overrated record. I do give this an okay. Next, we're going to talk about Dolk with Yggdrasil, ... nature, ... anthems. I was looking forward to this one because Yggdrasil, I expect something more forest-esque, more nature-y, more mystical. But you get a mix of stuff here. And it is another high contrast style of dungeon synth that has these somber, quiet moments that are more often than not okay, and these giant warlike, more adventurous parts, which I'm glad it's not just the blaring sort of aimless horn synths that various Mortiis records have, but here it does have a conveyed emotion, and it's war, and I think that's pretty interesting. It kind of conveys sort of a of Ruins of Beveras type feel of this really oncoming doom, which is kind of interesting. I don't think it's perfect, but I can appreciate the effort, at least. Funnily enough, you get this variance on the very last track here, and the first half of that track is probably the worst part of the album, but the second half is actually one of the best parts of the album. So it's really hard to recommend that track and also the rest of this album because it often flops at the heavy sections and is often decent at the lighter sections. But I will say the first track, even though it's loud, it manages to succeed with this super dense warlike drumming, and it really feels like something is coming here. It's really foreboding, a bit eerie even. Unfortunately, that is the only loud part on the album that I can truly recommend. The other parts aren't as strong. They kind of reconvey the same emotions. And whatever happened to albums starting with the most exciting track and then keeping your attention through the atmosphere built with that? If this was the only track that had the loud part, I think this would be honestly a great record, but it kind of flops as it continues to keep this tension and goes in pretty bizarre directions. Towards the end, it becomes more awkward Mortiis worship, so I can't really say I love this record. I do say it's okay. It's basically fine. Next, we get the artist Fjeltrone with Skogens Anda. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce this stuff, but this is up here, and I'm probably going to type it out here. And this one I was excited for because, of course, Fjeltronen by Wong Raven, which is included on this chart, actually, I mentioned it last time, is a fantastic release, super atmospheric, Viking metal inspired, Viking folk inspired, if you will. Some pretty cool pagan elements, I can dig that. But this does a very different approach. It's adventurous, action-packed, and actually danceable. It has like grooves that it's going for here. There are tons of floor toms, and the entire point is to have this syncopated type of approach here that makes you like want to dance. I'm not going to say it's Afrobeat inspired because that would be a bizarre claim, but if you said it, I would have to hold back from arguing entirely because it does have the danceable floor tom type of thing. There are some quiet moments as well, which are mostly fine. I can appreciate that this album is never blaring. It reaches like a middle level and it goes to some quieter stuff, even if that is relatively stagnant. But really, this just is what it is. It's just not really wowing me in any way. So I do say this is okay. Hope you guys are still paying attention because we are getting into better stuff, I promise. Next, we get into Mold Pony and Noldor with Lane Moore. I don't know. The funny thing about this is that a lot of this stuff is super hard to find in the first place, so it's kind of hilarious how it's even here because where was it even found? I think my cloak is upside down, to be honest with you guys. But this is an EP. It's about 26 minutes long. It's slow moving, it's minimalist, and it's got these soft harmonizing layers, which is already something to enjoy a lot more than these other records. There are decent little field recording bits. It actually kind of gives you some atmosphere with the nature recordings. There are so much strings on this record, but fortunately strings are typically a texture that I appreciate more than others on Dungeon Synth. And here, it's not much of an exception. The last couple tracks here are not as interesting, I will say, but overall, this thing is just an ambient Dungeon Synth, really nice piece of music, very auditorially pleasing, it's not obnoxious at all. It's pretty atmospheric, probably some Berlin School inspiration here and there, and I can appreciate it for what it is. I do say it's good. Next, we're going to talk about Lamentation with Full Moon over Fairhaven, and this is a 45-minute demo, and it sounds rad. So this record here is lo-fi with a ton of flanger effects, which I thought was kind of fun. You get these oscillating little mystical sounding synths here. It's got a really crunchy low fidelity, and it's kind of magical feeling, and it's a bit psychedelic even. And because of the nature of this demo, it feels very twee, very almost like rudimentary, kind of pastoral. It's got some really fun notes of like rust, dirt, having no money, and eating gruel, and sleeping 6 people to a bed. And there's drumming on this record, as there are on plenty of Dungeon Synth records, but it's just a kick drum and toms. It never gets that obnoxious, which is kind of cool. There's a lot of the piano setting on a keyboard, and it sounds really raw, but it's actually kind of fun. The progression through the tracks is rather immersive, and it never destroys the flow. It's these long-winded, sort of sweeping movements that actually sound really pleasing. So I think this is a great record, In terms of a demo, really fun, probably good to get a cassette player and listen to this long, sweeping thing. Could be fun. And up next is Lord Wolf with Darklands of Hate, which is a fun title. This is a half-hour demo. It's charming, and it's got this really raw thing going for it. If you can't tell, it's the raw stuff that typically is going to be ideal in this section. And what's funny about this thing is it's a super minimalist setup. It's consistently 2 sets of keyboards that play different textures, and it'll be a harmony of a lower bass part and a higher part. It's very interesting. It's very melancholic and isolating. It reminds me a lot of the movie Nosferatu, if you guys have ever seen that. Not as huge sounding as the organs on the soundtrack of that movie, or the score rather, but it does reflect the slow-moving exposition shots of that movie. Which, if you haven't seen that movie, go see it. It's pretty interesting. And this is one of the few records on this whole chart that fits the name of Dungeon Synth. It actually feels dungeon-like. It's so lonely, and a lot of that is conveyed through the actually kind of experimental nature of this thing, having just the 2 keyboards. I mean, of course, it's outsider. It's not like there's not really a conscious decision. I'm pretty sure it's more of a limitation on this record than it is a conscious decision, but at the same time, I can appreciate the textures. It's incredibly lonely, yet very atmospheric. It's the raw, buzzy nature of the recording that provides that extra bit of atmosphere. It's almost like an extra bass layer that is so raw. There is a 12-minute track called Blood Red Full Moon Guides Us Forth. It's got these really awesome, soft, and like very slow and more gradual style of movement that is really immersive, and it's super hypnotic. That's what's fun about this whole thing, is that it's actually rather hypnotic. It feels like you're losing it in this dungeon, and I can appreciate that a lot. It's very twee, very raw. If you play this at Dungeons & Dragons, you're going to get a good reaction if you're trying to find a more quiet moment. But this thing is great, of course. And then we're going to talk about probably my favorite thing on this chart other than Wong Raven. This is Forgotten Dreamscapes with This Place Where Destiny Is Made. This is a very short EP here, but it's also, the textures are phenomenal. And what's unfortunate is that this release is really slept on, It was mentioned on one Dungeon Synth blog where people who are more into Dungeon Synth than I am are just spamming Dungeon Synth. And of course, you had it on a Dungeon Synth archive on YouTube, which a lot of the more retrospective uploads are better than a lot of the more modern things. But, I can't really say much about that. Because, my favorite Dungeon Synth channels that upload new stuff is like Dungeon Synth Noise or Dungeon Synth Treasures or whatever. But this thing only exists there, and you can download it for free from a different website. So I have all the files downloaded, and at some point, maybe I'm going to put it on a CDR or something. But it's just a 15-minute long EP, nothing too complicated. And it's from 2012, so I believe this is the most recent upload on this entire chart. But unfortunately, it's the least popular. And it's the project's only release, which is a real shame because it's, as you're going to see, it's one of my favorites. It's very simple. It's not overcrowded, and it's got this gorgeous set of synth layers. And there's a ton of air in the sound. It's got so much space. It's these beautiful yet very cold and slow-moving passages. And the string textures are excellent as well. The Return of Marco, I believe is what it's called. It's a gorgeous track. Got really nice slow movements, and it's got these really cool decayed textures. And that's a cool thing about this record, is that a lot of these textures have really interesting decay settings, or just like low pass filters and stuff that actually makes it feel like the instruments being played themselves are old or ruined or rusty or something like that. It's really fun. But this is one of the most atmospheric releases here. It's really beautiful. It's such a shame that this guy hasn't made anything else. I mean, I doubt anyone else on YouTube has talked about this except for Dungeons and Archives, which just uploaded the full release here. But I recommend this to you guys so much. I really encourage you guys to go check it out. It's great. One of the best I've heard ever. I've posted on other Discord pages just to be like, hey, it's worth checking out. But those are all the Dungeon Synth records that we're talking about for the year. I got a little more October content coming out before Nothing But Black Metal November, which I'm so hyped for. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed the Dungeon Synth releases, tell me what you think about them down below. You probably disagree with me, but you know what? That's totally fine. Comments, questions, and concerns down below, please. If you have anything else to say, go ahead, dude. I'm totally open to chat. My social media is in the description if you want to talk to me or follow me there. I respond to pretty much everything, so totally hit me up. And of course, my Discord's there too, and we've been talking about a lot of fun stuff recently. And you know, that's about it. Hope you guys are doing well out there. Have a good day. Bye.